The Gospel, which quotes at some length the prophet Isaiah, contains a description before the time of the personality of the Messiah. It has been taken up by commentators insofar as it contains also a principle which is used in the domain of hearing confessions and directing souls. I remember way back in formation in the 70s being told this in France: one does not quench the smouldering flax. If one has before one a soul, one sees if there is still any smouldering going on. And that's the point of redeparture. It's something that was picked up also by the Vatican in the Vade Mecum that they gave some years ago to those engaged in the ministry of confession. It's the notion of, in some way, realizing that the concreteness of the soul before one is what it is, and therefore one tries to do one's best when hearing confession to get it at least within its parameters into the best possible state by the end of the confession, which can mean therefore a lot of patience on the part of the confessor. In other words, one hopes for a series of confessions and to follow through. The point being that one can do a lot of harm by not realizing the reality of humanity. That same good novice master told us how in the realm of confessions, and he was somebody who had been ordained before coming in, he entered in 1936 but was ordained before, he knew how when young priests came out of the seminary, they intended to be actually somewhat severe insofar as they were applying all that they had learned in class. Ils veulent appliquer la règle, they want to apply the rule. And he went on to say, les vieux prêtres sont très bons. The old priests are very good. In French, bon also means kind, gentle. And so he was explaining that the more one gets to know souls, the less damage perhaps one can actually do. One has the flair for souls. One, as it were, sniffs out a person's interior. Which brings me to where I want to land. In college days, first time round, it was in Aberystwyth, and I sometimes used to drift into what was going on a Saturday evening because they had good speakers. And one time we had Peter Trumper, who was in those days an actor, and he was also a good speaker and a Christian, and he came to talk to us about issues to do with prayer and the Christian life. And he came out with this: it's not what you say that counts, it's the way you smell. And it was a profound truth which I've never forgotten, but which also has been picked up by the Christian centuries, even with a gift of the Spirit, the gift of being able to intuit and know if the person there in front is in a state of grace or of grave sin. Many saints have had it, but it can also happen to us by sharpening our spiritual nose. It's one thing that comes linked with another technique which I'll bring to you at the end. Just stay for a moment with this flair. One time, St. Joseph of Cupertino indicated that he had this gift. He himself actually emitted some kind of odour which some people picked up indicating his own purity and sanctity. It was just something that was there, objective now. But also he could himself perceive the stench. One time he appeared to be exceedingly restless and perplexed. On being asked the cause, he replied that he had just spoken to a licentious person, translate, a naughty person. I think you know in what field. Who had filled his nose with such a stench that he could not remove it, not even by using snuff. He often mentioned that the impure stink before God, before the angels and men, was something that he was aware of. It's actually useful because you're less easily taken in. I'll come to that in a minute. One time while speaking with the guardian in the Franciscan life, that's the prior, he suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, what a stench!" And he actually uses in the correct way here, "Oh, what a hellish stench," because hell stinks. By the way, if ever you go to a place where there is volcanic movement, I go there every year because the monastery goes back every year in Lent. Near our own monastery is built on a volcano, and around about there are openings where hot air and water come out and the stench to go with it. And if a cat goes there to keep warm in the winter, he'll soon fall asleep and die. Sulfur. So it's awful, it's bad eggs, but that's basically probably something of an idea of what is down there in the middle of the earth, and therefore it's probably a pale reflection of what the bad company of the demon is. All the senses are badly affected, as they were in this life, titillated badly. It's all in reverse down there. Noise. The music is awful. The guardian, that is the superior, detected nothing, but St. Joseph knew the cause and obtained permission to journey to the town. Upon reaching a certain house, he persistently knocked at the door until he was admitted. Running up the stairs, he came upon a number of sorcerers, men and women alike. Seeing a number of vases and pots with salves and oils, he thrashed about with his cane until he had broken all the vessels. The sorcerers became so terrified at the saint's fury that they all fled in dismay. Our own Catherine of Siena, who used to use our monastery, she had all the gifts as well. She was not easily taken in. Indeed, she was asked by the Lord to go and talk to the Pope, who was by then away from Rome in Avignon, Pope Gregory, and to get him back to Rome, which she did. But she did it like this. She appeared before him without any human respect of persons. In other words, all the correct protocol was observed, and then she got to the point. There is a stench here. This place stinks. The Italian she used was puzza. It's a powerful word. An odour. Ugh. So she went then into greater detail and gave him a list of things that in his past he'd never dealt with, in confession, presumably. Oh. So he took her very seriously. And though she was pretty illiterate, only a little damsel, he came back to Rome. This repeated itself one time when somebody else was taken in. One day she met a woman who was leading an evil life. And I believe that she met her in company with Blessed Raymond of Capua, who was her confessor. He was older than she, and of course he became Grand Master of the Order, and also Blessed himself. And nevertheless, he, strangely enough, when talking to her, always said, "Mamma." They had a curious understanding of each other. So, while this woman and Catherine were talking together, I was present too, so he's writing this. And while the woman seemed decent enough in her dress and behaviour, I noticed that she was never able to look the Virgin straight in the face. Wondering at this, I took the trouble to find out who the woman was, and was told that she was as described above, that is, a decent woman. I mentioned this to the Virgin, and she told me privately, if you had smelt the stink that I could smell while I was talking to her, you would have been sick. So the odour of a soul is something which the Lord is aware of, the angels are aware of, and saints who are close to them become almost physically aware of. There is also, strangely enough, in the order of creation, a gift given to higher animals that we haven't got, and they might have something of this, actually. You know that when a dog is at a shop waiting for its owner to come out, every person who passes by is passed through his filing system. It sniffs and therefore registers forevermore that person, better than any computer. But some higher animals also seem to pick up other things. One time I was talking to a friend of mine in Carnarvon, and he had a big dog. They called him Prince, and he was normally okay, but he could be quite nasty if he wanted to be a good guard dog. And at one stage there was some altercation between himself and his wife, and the dog picked up this and went before the wife and started to snarl at the husband and defend her. I've heard also from a friend, there was one of the sisters in the family I knew very well who was in a bad way, and they were very concerned about her. They were in the sitting room, and suddenly the dog, out of his sleep, got up, went charging down to a specific spot, the river, and found her, presumably about to commit suicide. And there are many cases in which dogs are able to pick up what we cannot. One time, St. John Paul II was about to visit a very large seminary in the States, Boston or somewhere, and they made sure that there was no one about to do anything strange there, that there was no one hiding about to explode any bombs. So they sent these sniffer dogs in, and they all went to a dog in one direction and stopped there and started making indications there was a presence, there was a presence, there was a presence, there. I think you know where. So they were able to presumably in some way detect that there was for them, a human presence. After all, the humanity is there in the tabernacle, but it was a real presence which they were able to pick up without the fullness of catechism. It's objective reality, and they were picking it up. And actually, even when I was 13, and at that stage still an anti-Catholic evangelical, it happened to me, because the only church in our area opened was the Catholic one, and there was something I knew when I went in there. I couldn't get away from it. It was something which we didn't have, and I could feel it. So it's happened to others too. I've heard about it often. I want to zoom into what we can do to sharpen our awareness of things. There is one trick. It's linked with the Gospel. We notice that the Lord is described by Isaiah as the one who will not raise his voice and will not quench the smouldering wick. Now, there are ways in which we can come into any situation and we can completely put out what might be coming at us by precisely raising our voice and emitting our energy and deflecting all that might want to come into us. I remember one time with my friend from school days going to visit him in Oxford one weekend. He's now a clergyman like his father, and he took me to a few key places in Oxford. Fairacres, the Carmelite Anglican, high Anglican place there in Oxford, where actually one of my classmates, a girl, tried a vocation for a year. She was an Anglican. And also Wantage, which, by the way, by now has left the Anglican Church to become Catholic. They were a very high church when we were there, very high church, in a beautiful monastery, but they had to leave the whole monastery and find a small Catholic structure. But they're poor but rich in faith, and it's far more important to their soul to be at peace. They were spending lots of time adoring a piece of bread, and somehow the Lord from the piece of bread got through to them. I'm not here. But their chaplain was ultra-high church, a very good man, Derek Allen. They used to call him Daddy Allen. He'd be one to hear confidences of many, many young future Anglican clergymen in Oxford. So we went to have a chat with him, and he had a method, and we used to refer to it as the vacuum cleaner tactic. It used to go something like this. You'd go before him, silence. You lift up your, have you anything to tell me? And so, silence. And so he felt uncomfortable. So he looked for something to say. You started to open up, you unzipped your soul, and then you came to a pause. You might pick up the last word. More silence. So you started to dig deeper and look for more things. The message was this: you haven't yet told me all. So anyway, by the end, you see, the vacuum cleaner functioned perfectly well, and he was all the wiser, and there were no more secrets in the equation. So I leave it with you, my friends. How many people go through a conversation exchanging generously all the contents of their heart and mind, enriching everyone with all that they know, and going away from the conversation not in the least bit enriched. If we knew the trick of not opening our mouth, but our ear to all the pores of our soul, perhaps too we would pick up the stink or the perfume of the soul before us.